Welcome to the Town of Avon Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. If you're interested in having a copy of the agenda or the staff reports, they're available on the tables to the right of the audience. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that all personal conversations are kept to a minimum and all cell phones are set to vibrate, with any phone calls taken outside of the chambers. If you're interested in commenting during any public hearing, please sign up on the sheets located to the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to the staff or the appellant. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. We do understand that there may be several persons who wish to speak. The chair may therefore impose a time limit for each person. Federal law requires that the town make available to all attendees a Title VI public involvement survey. These surveys are on the table to the right of the audience. Members of the public who wish to complete this survey may do so and place them in the designated area. If, because of disability, any person in attendance needs assistance or accommodation to fully participate in this meeting, please notify staff. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Again, welcome to our meeting. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have a roll call, please?
Paul Guckenberger.
Here.
Marcy Tashler.
Here.
Marcus Turner.
Here.
Catherine Ransberg.
Here.
And Inman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of minutes. Did anyone have any questions, concerns? And if there are none, we'll entertain a motion.
I move we accept the meeting minutes from the May 19th meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Ransberg and a second by Mrs. Inman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item is a request for continuances or agenda modifications. Is staff aware of any?
None.
Okay. Next item is public comment. Would anyone like to speak during public comment? Then we will move on to new business. This is SE 22-03, Chick-fil-A at Beechwood Center. Staff?
Sure. So we're going to be doing some cross training. Those of you who are on the Plan Commission noticed that I have been taking on petitions as part of the Plan Commission. And today we'll be having another member of our planning staff, Daniel, here, who has prepared your staff reports and who will be presenting to you today. So Daniel, take it away.
The first case on the agenda is Special Exception 2203, Chick-fil-A Beechwood Center. This is a request for approval of a special exception to allow for a drive-through use in Tier 1 of the US Highway 36 Overlay District. The location is at 7606 East US Highway 36, and the subject property is located north of US Highway 36 at Lot 4C of the Beechwood Center subdivision. This is located at the former PNC Bank between First Merchants Bank and Dairy Queen, just south of Rural King. And here's a location exhibit. You can see the site is highlighted in yellow. Some history on the site. The subject property was part of the original incorporation of the town. The property is zoned C2 and it falls within Tier 1 of US Highway 36 Overlay District. The lot was platted under MIP 03-04, Beechwood Center Lot 4C, alongside with a development plan DPR 03-15, National City Bank. Since then, PNC Bank occupied the site. However, the lot is currently vacant. In the future demolition of this building, the legally established drive-through use will be abandoned, thus requiring the special exception. Here's a zoning map. You can see it's predominantly commercial. Here you can see a site plan with the drive-through. And here's another site plan we were provided with the drive-through on the western and southern portion, which we'll get into in the variance. Some comments we have per subsection 210E, drive-throughs are listed as a use that requires a special exception under Tier 1 of the U.S. Highway 36 Overlay District. The petitioner is proposing to construct a Chick-fil-A restaurant with a drive-through use, as is integral to a Chick-fil-A's business model. And staff finds this proposal to be consistent with and conducive to the surrounding land uses. And the site currently has a drive-through, and as do many of the neighboring Beechwood Center outlots. And staff finds that this proposal meets all criteria for a special exception. With that, we recommend approval of this petition, subject to the following condition. Approval is subject to the review and approval of a development plan review petition in accordance with Article 810 of the Town of Avon Unified Development Ordinance. I'm open for questions.
Questions for staff? If there are none, we're ready to hear from petitioner.
Thank you, and good evening. Chairman Turner, members of the board, Joe Calderin, 11 South Meridian, Indianapolis. I represent the applicant, which is an affiliate of Allrig Real Estate Development Company. Oh, thank you. Do you want me to repeat that? Yeah, sure, why not? Okay. Joe Calderin, 11 South Meridian, Indianapolis, Indiana, representing the applicant in this matter. I think Dan did a nice job summarizing what we're asking for. Clearly, this is a scenario where the existing conditions are kind of driving the special exception request, since there was a whole series of outlots in Tier 1 at Beechwood Center that was really completed before contemplation of the overlay. I am going to hand out a booklet that I'll use for both the special exception portion and the variance portion, if I may. Thank you. It's a pretty simplistic booklet, but it does contain the engineered site plan, obviously the aerial, and then the building elevations. The building elevations aren't necessarily important for the special exception. However, it does give you a feel for the type of quality that you're probably familiar with over on the east side of town, and this will be a new build, a new prototype restaurant. As Dan mentioned, not only is drive-through integral for Chick-fil-A's operation, all restaurants have really, due to the pandemic, had to adapt to the carry-out and drive-through phenomenon, and that's really kind of continued even as we get past that. So the special exception request, being simple enough, does have a series of findings of fact. We've tendered those with our application, but I'll just summarize those very quickly for you so you can take your vote. The special exception, item 1, is just to confirm whether or not the use that's requested is a special exception use, and that is definitive yes. There's not really much fact finding to that. The next criteria is similar to certainly one of the statutory variance criteria, and that is, will this operation be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare? We think that this will actually not only serve the community, but it will, what I say, soak up some pent-up demand that is being experienced over the east side location, and hopefully serve both the community better by having 2 locations and make it more convenient for the community. Will also improve the traffic flow for both locations by having that kind of relief valve. Criteria 3, will the operation be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity or substantially diminish or impair property values within the zoning district? As Dan pointed out, we are adjacent to the Dairy Queen, which is a drive-through. The bank branch also has drive-through, so will be substantially similar. Anytime in my experience that a existing property that's been developed can be reused, redeveloped is a good thing and actually supports property values. Will this use be served adequately by essential public facilities and services such as highways, streets, police, fire protection, drainage structures, refuse, disposal, water, sewer, and schools? Yes, this site already is ready to go. It's already been developed once. It served adequately. The access drive into Beechwood Center is actually a public street. So all the utilities are in place. So yes, that criteria we feel is met. And then 5 is, will the use create excessive additional requirements at public expense for public facilities, be detrimental to the economic welfare, result in destruction, loss, damage of any feature? No. While a building will be demolished, it will be replaced. The building that is being demolished doesn't have any historical features or significance. This new investment will certainly be supportive of the community's goals and the community's welfare economically and otherwise. 6, has there been previous appeals for this property within the last year? No. Then there's some additional criteria that you could consider, and these are all in the staff report. Does this proposed special exception meet the requirement standards of this ordinance, relationship, compatibility to adjacent properties? Yes, this outlot's already created. It's completely self-contained. We'll meet our setbacks. We have to go through the development plan approval process. So yes, is our answer to that. Does this special exception make adequate provision for public services, provide adequate control over vehicular traffic, provide and protect designated common open space, and further the amenities of light, air, recreation? We think that's kind of the whole point of doing this location in the fashion that we are, is to provide for much better vehicular access and particularly in the drive-through experience. The outlot's been set. There's existing landscaping along the frontage. So we feel that we meet this criteria. And then does the proposed special exception meet in accord with the general objectives of the comprehensive plan? And yes, this does follow the comprehensive plan recommendation for commercial type use. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. We hope that you feel that this is an appropriate special exception request for this particular piece of property.
And we'll stop here for just a minute to open up the public hearing. Is everyone signed up to speak? Is there anyone who would like to speak? And with no one coming forward, we'll close the public hearing. Discussion, questions?
I do have a question. You made mention of this being a prototype. Is this a new type of Chick-fil-A restaurant?
They're constantly working on building types. I think that this one is laid out a little differently than some of the ones that you've seen. So this one will look very much like the ones that you're experienced with. This one just has a little bit different layout with the canopies and kind of the orientation of the building. So
So it's not like an entirely new type
No,
of restaurant
it's not a
service. It's
new
just
concept. It's a different
new
type
design.
of building, oriented a little differently. We'll get into some of that in the variants, but the neat thing is it adequately separates the folks that want to dine in from the folks that are more interested in the drive-through. That's a chief difference in this particular prototype.
So the people can, if I'm looking at this correctly, people who want to dine in can park and walk into the restaurant without having to deal with drive-through traffic.
Exactly. And our franchisee is actually here in case you want to ask him, but he's got to manage a team, and his team is largely populated by kids. So we want to keep them safe. They're very busy all the time. So this is one of those scenarios where we think that this layout works perfectly for this kind of drive-through arrangement, while still providing good indoor experience. And there will be outdoor seating as well.
So I have a question on as far as like menu boards, that if we would put an additional condition on here that all menu boards would be in the rear or side yards, is there any issues with that?
No, and that Mr. Guckenberger is actually in the variance condition, not the special exception condition. I will testify that we're absolutely fine with that condition. And that will all have to come through your plan commission as part of the development approval process. But when we get to it, that condition is acceptable.
Okay.
Both of those elements are behind the front building line.
Stand corrected. Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions?
Well, I like the idea that this is taking an abandoned lot and repurposing it in a similar type of commercial use. And I certainly have heard plenty of people say, when are we going to get a Chick-fil-A in Avon? So maybe we can solve one problem.
I think for the purposes of the special exception, I think the staff report hits all the high points, and the fact that it had a drive-through before further supports their
And there's a drive-through
right
on
to have
both
one in the
sides. Yeah.
future.
It fits well with the surrounding environs.
Any other discussion?
Public comment.
We've already done that.
Sorry, husband. Most been reading.
It's okay, Paul.
If there's no other questions or discussion, we'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve SE 2203, a special exception required under the permitted use table in Article 3.2 of the Town of Avon Unified Development Ordinance to allow a drive-through facility in Tier 1 of the US 36 Overlay District, subject to the following conditions. Approval is subject to the review and approval of a development plan review petition in accordance with Article 8.10 of the Avon Unified Development Ordinance, on the basis that it has satisfied all the requirements for special exceptions under state law and subject to the approved finding of facts.
We have a motion by Mrs. Ransberg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And we got a second by Ms. Tashler. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Paul Greenberg,
For.
Marcy Dasher. Four. Marcus Stern.
4.
Catherine Rander.
4.
And Inman.
4.
Thank you.
And the next item on the agenda is, this is VAR 22-04A and B, Chick-fil-A Beechwood Center. Staff?
VAR 2204 A and B, Chick-fil-A Beechwood Center. This is a request for a two-part variance of development standards relating to the site's drive-through. The first is a request to allow for a drive-through with stacking located in a front yard facing US Highway 36. And the second variance is to allow for a drive-through without a bypass lane. Same location, same history. The applicable standards are subsection 210K. All components of a drive-through, including stacking space, menu boards, and pickup windows, must be located within the side or rear yards of a lot. Drive-through components cannot be located within the front yard, or in case of a corner lot, cannot be located in the front yard that faces US Highway 36. And subsection 612B3. Each drive-through lane must have a bypass lane at least 12 feet wide. And the bypass lane also serves as a drive aisle for parking. The minimum aisle width noted in table 6.1 must be provided. Bypass lanes do not need to be marked. So here's again the preliminary concept. So staff believes that these standards were calculated for restaurants that have a much lower volume of drive-through users than is generally experienced at a Chick-fil-A restaurant at peak times. These variances would improve site navigability and stacking capacity and allow for the efficient and convenient site layout by separating the site's drive-through and parking lot. The strict application of the ordinance would constitute a practical difficulty in the design of this site. Having drive-through elements facing US Highway 36 is not something atypical of the Beechwood Center area. Both adjoining properties to the east and west have drive-through elements in their front yards facing US Highway 36. And the absence of a bypass lane will allow for this increased stacking capacity, which would likely reduce spillover onto Beechwood Center Road. Staff does not believe that these variants would adversely affect the neighboring area. So with that, we recommend approval of the petition subject to the following conditions. For variance 2204-A, menu boards and pickup windows shall not be located in the yard that faces US Highway 36, and any subsequent development plan review petition for the subject site shall be reasonably consistent with the provided concept plan on file. And for variance 2204B, we recommend the condition that clear and conspicuous private directional signage and or pavement markings shall be installed to navigate automobile operators to their desired locations. I'm open for questions.
So anyone have any questions for staff?
I'd just like to ask on the variance for the passing lane. So I would think for a business with high volume, that's where you'd want a bypass lane, somebody that would abandon their order to be able to get out and then move around. So, and I'll ask the petitioner about that when they're here, how they handle that. But so I just want to further understand the thinking behind that.
Yeah, so the way we see it, the higher the stacking volume, the more traffic we can contain on the site. They're proposing 42 stacking spaces, but the ordinance only requires them to have 6 stacking spaces. So that additional stacking, we see that as a way to contain the drive-through use on the site and reduce the spillover.
If we look at tab 2 of the petitioner's handout, which has the engineering plans, it took me a little bit to figure this out, but most of the time when you think about your standard drive-through, the drive-through lane is in the middle of the property, and then the parking for people who want to go inside is on the exterior of the property. And so you have to, in order to go from your parking space into the building, you have to, at least for part of it, depending on where you're parking, you have to navigate that. If I'm looking at this correctly, the drive-through lanes are all on the exterior and the parking lanes are on the interior. So there's no connection in that. So, and it allows for heavier volume is the way I'm looking at it. I'm kind of surprised nobody's come up with this design before.
We've had it in other locations.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this, I'm like, this makes so much sense. How come nobody thought of this before? But probably because a lot of drive-throughs were just added on to pre-existing buildings.
I had a question for staff, and typically when I sit down and review these, the first thing I always ask myself is, for the variance that's being requested, why do we have this ordinance in the first place? Can you tell me I looked it up. I tried to look it up online and tried to figure out what is the function of the bypass lane. And all I could find out was that everybody in this area requires them. What is the purpose of the bypass? What's its intended function?
I think the primary function of the bypass lane is to offer choices to, leave the drive-through if you so desire. Yeah, I would say it's mainly for choices.
Okay.
But doesn't it also give people who are leaving the parking lot access to leave the parking lot and to get around? I mean, I'm thinking of the McDonald's there in front of Kroger, and there's 2 drive-through lanes. But if you're parked right there at the entrance to the drive-through lanes, you need that bypass lane to get out of the parking lot. But that wouldn't be, I don't think that'd be necessary with this design, except it doesn't give people the option of leaving the drive-through lane if the fryer's down or something, so.
And specifically what I was getting at is the function of it simply for convenience, or is there a safety function here? I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I think safety is definitely something that is part of the function of the bypass lane. But staff would say we're more concerned about the stacking going on to Beechwood Center Road than we are about having this bypass lane from a safety standpoint.
And this has been through TAC, and
No, this has not
been through
it
TAC,
has
so
not
we don't
been
have
filed
any,
as a DPR
we don't have
yet.
any comments from public safety.
No, we do not.
I do have a question though, because now that we're talking about not being able to exit the drive-through lane, I guess if there is an emergency, if there's a car stalled or something like that, they just drive through the yard? Just get pulled out of the yard? How's that addressed? A bypass lane allows for that access.
Right. We believe that with the condition of the signage, people will have the adequate and ample opportunity to avoid the drive-through. We believe it's, their choice to enter the drive-through.
Well, I'm talking about if you're already in the drive-through and your car breaks down, or you're in the drive-through, or a medical emergency happens, the bypass, because there's no bypass lane, there's no way to get that vehicle out of. Are the two, and I can't tell by looking, are the 2 lanes separated by a divider, or are they just 2 lanes right next to each other?
I believe they are separated. That's probably a better question for the petitioner. I
Okay.
didn't review the site plan to those kinds of standards.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? If there's no more questions for staff, we'll hear from petitioner.
Thank you. Well, let's just kind of pick up where the conversation with staff left off, and if you'll all open your booklet to tab 2, and we could even put it on the screen if we wanted to. I think the idea of this layout provides not only an efficiency enhancement, but we also think a safety enhancement, not so much for the off chance that a situation where a car breaks down or what have you while you're in, but when you think about the normal drive-through situation, particularly under your UDO, where you allow the bypass lane to be kind of used as a drive aisle too. What this does is segregates and reduces any conflicts between folks that are parking and walking into the building, out of the building, back to their cars, and not crossing that drive-through traffic. So we think that safety in 99.95% of the cases will be actually enhanced through this. By allowing that customer, when they come in, to kind of view the landscape and either decide to queue in or park and walk-in for that type of service, we think that makes much more sense than the traditional model of having that parking on the outside of the drive-through lane and then the bypass lane, which serves as a drive aisle anyway. We think that's going to reduce the amount of conflict for traffic coming in. As all of us have no doubt experienced from time to time, whether it's Chick-fil-A or what other drive-through service, whether it's Dairy Queen on a hot night or whatever, the worst thing in the world is to approach a business from a public street and want to turn in, and you've got the stacking all the way backed up to where nobody can get in and out. And that's what this design is intended to do, is just completely mitigate that type of scenario by having that additional stacking space in 2 lanes. And that's just, people love Chick-fil-A that much that and there's an awful lot of family traffic with kids in the back, and they just want to get their stuff and go. And that's a big part of the market. And I know that business reasons aren't always why we approve variances. We approve them because the code either doesn't contemplate something new, which is no fault of the code, that happens all the time. Your code, even though it's newly adopted, is essentially a carryover in these provisions on the 36 overlay from the previous version. So we would submit that this layout is not only more efficient, but we think safer, not only for customers, but for, again, the team members, the employees that are having to do things, to serve their customers, by keeping that traffic separately. And that's obviously a key finding. So, when we look at variances of development standards, we kind of look at the effect on the overall community, public health, safety, welfare. And we've got kind of 2 concepts going on here. One, having stacking that fronts in a front yard. And we've actually got 2 front yards because Beechwood Center Drive, let's see the name of the street back there. Beechwood Center Road is actually public. So we actually have 2 front yards. So we are kind of stuck either way. But obviously the more biggest concern is that look and feel along 30 from the 36 frontage. Well, there's existing yard space and landscaping. We'll have to meet all of that as we go on, which will help soften that kind of view. So it doesn't preclude, ironically, if there were parking spots between 36 and the building, it's just kind of that drive-through stacking. So you still have vehicles, but it will be mitigated through landscaping. As far as that is concerned, as far as the public health, safety, and welfare for the double stacking, again, by enabling customers to have adequate stacking space and avoid spillover, we think that's a very important thing to bring to you as a board tonight. And then we go on to whether or not this arrangement and the request for variances adversely affect our neighbors. And we've got 2 true adjoiners, notwithstanding the parking lot for Rural King. We got Dairy Queen to the west and the bank to the east, and they are actually similarly situated in terms of having drive-through and cars between 36 and their buildings. And again, by reducing the opportunity for spillover, it helps those businesses. We don't want to block any drive aisles for any of our neighbors. Rural King, it's all parking lot between then and there, so there shouldn't be any adverse impact to them as an adjoining property owner. We think that, as we move into the other criteria, and practical difficulties, one of those terms that we all like to use and we think about it in our everyday nomenclature, but it also, at least in the zoning law, has a legal significance to it. And we believe that by the fact that this is a site that's constrained already, we're not just picking out and developing a site and we can pick our acreage and things like that. We have to work within the bounds. So we have to do something that works well within all the requirements of the 36 overlay. And we think that these variances are the minimum required to make the business economically viable, which is one of the allowed tests for practical difficulty. And we hope that that makes some sense to you as a deciding body. We are not looking to do anything more than the best we can to serve customers in an efficient manner, to make that investment worthwhile, to keep the employees safe and to keep the public safe as well. And again, while it is true that business owners have choices to make as they improve property, we don't have a choice as to the physical constraints of this property with the 2 front yards and the shape and size. We are stuck with that. We have to work within that. So we think that's kind of the final criteria. Staff's conditions are absolutely fine with us. And again, we do have to go through the entire development plan approval process, which we'll thoroughly examine, and we'll have to address any questions by other departments as we go through that. We'll put in a great looking building. It'll be a successful business. It will certainly help relieve some of the experience that we encounter at the other store. And we think that this is overall good for the community and not detrimental to our neighbors. So we hope that you find that we've met our findings and can support the 2 variances. Happy to answer any questions.
Let's pause here. We'll open up the public hearing. Did anyone sign up to speak? And would anyone like to speak at the public hearing?
Do you want to say?
Hello, my name is Chris Tincher. I live at 1456 Northern Valley Trail here in Avon. And just want to say how excited we are. I'm the franchisee of the current location here in Avon, and our restaurant just celebrated 20 years here in Avon. And we're a tremendous supporter of our community. I love our customers. Our customers have really come to trust our service, and really excited about this new opportunity that actually is going to alleviate some of the capacity current restraints we have at our restaurant, give our current employees a lot of additional opportunities, and obviously be able to serve more customers. But I just thought I'd answer your question in regards to the, if I can, I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, in regards to if a car becomes stalled. And I will say that that actually currently happens even in our current location. Ultimately, we just kind of get in there and we actually help remove the car. So we'll just kind of push it out and take care and serve that customer and get them to a place where the vehicle and the customer is safe. Overall, with this design, it is a design that Chick-fil-A uses in their newer restaurants where it's possible in new communities. I will say that dedicated drive-through for our team members' safety, it would be paramount for us to have the opportunity where it's just dedicated cars only, just for our team members not having to walk through traffic. Obviously, for customers coming in, having the opportunity to make a decision whether they'll be able to see that clearly about getting into the drive-through lane or actually go ahead and park. So we believe that it will definitely be beneficial to our team, community, customers, and our guests. So, thank you.
Anyone else?
I would like to ask a question just to follow up on my obsession here. So between the 2 lanes, and I don't know if who wants to answer this. So if I'm looking at the perspective, which is in tab 3, it looks like between the 2 lanes, there's just it's like maybe a a marked yellow space and
Yeah,
some.
it's just painted. It's not
Okay.
raised concrete.
So if
to separate the
necessary,
lanes.
traffic could be
You can
diverted.
move between the lanes.
Okay,
yes.
that solves the
Yeah,
problem entirely for me.
Okay.
Okay, I have several questions.
Okay.
Actually. And I don't know who needs to answer, but I'm just going to kind of throw them out here. First of all, I'm curious whether letters were sent out to, because there is a residential area. We went through this a little bit with Rural King and so forth. So were there any letters or was there a need to do that?
Of course,
Or
this
did you get
is-
any
yeah,
public feedback?
Yeah, this is a public hearing. We actually overnoticed, frankly. Your requirements are too deep or 660. It's just easier to do 660 on Beacon to get your list. We're so busy, I just didn't have time to pare it down. So we overnoticed. Zero calls. That's obviously why nobody's here, but we did. And we sent in our notice affidavit electronically, and Dan has the original. So we did notify quite a number of people.
And no negative, no feedback?
Nothing,
Okay.
no negative.
Okay, thank you. So I'd also like to know what the hours of operation would be. And my follow-up with that and my thinking is I'm one that thinks about lighting and things like that. So kind of wondering what time to what time, and do your lights stay on all night, or how does that look? Can you paint that
Ms.
picture?
Tashler, I can't answer that question. Do you want to answer that, Chris?
So typical hours of the restaurant would probably be about 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. We do keep the lights on. They will be off. They typically will be off when the restaurant closes. So typically about 11 o'clock when we are completely cleaned and closed down the restaurant and we have exited. So then the lights will go off and just have some gentle interior lights on the inside.
So are they dimmers, or do they go
So-
down, so to speak, in a dimming kind of situation, or how does that work?
Yeah, I would say currently just the LED parking light bulbs, so those will be on and then they'll just be off. So it would completely go off at a certain point.
So the building would be dark?
That is correct. There is some soft interior lighting that we'll keep on. But other than that, we'll have a lot of, have that light noise and things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And my last question is regarding landscape. I don't know if there is a landscape plan, or was there one
Not yet.
done,
We did draw in to the engineer plan that kind of the ideas of where landscaping would go. You can kind of see those on the interior and exterior. If you look at tab 2, it's kind of shaded a little bit. So there will be plenty of landscaping plus, and again, this is important from, I think, both the landscaping and lighting standards, which are valid questions. That is all borne out in the development plan approval process. So we'll have to file very detailed, really construction level plans, all of which is vetted through your staff, through the other agencies, and then ultimately approved by the Plan Commission. So we'll have to meet or beat the standards. We have not applied for any variances for landscaping. We just don't have a detailed landscaping plan to present to you tonight, just the areas that we've kind of identified on the exterior and the interior for that.
So maybe not a question, but a comment. I like the design. I think it's innovative, and from a safety perspective, I think it's really good. And having experience crossing drive-through traffic, it would make me feel much safer. So as others have said here, I think that's really good. And I think the staff has done a good job of and answering the question about not having the bypass lane. And really, as I think about this too, one is I like how you were looking at keeping traffic off of Beechwood Drive there. But also, I think if you're going through the drive-through, you're pretty committed to going through the drive-through.
One of the, and I don't want to
If they're going to
interrupt.
abandon,
One
they're
of
going to drive through.
one of the neat things is that when you come into this site, you'll get to see right where you're supposed to order pretty early on. So you're not going to be in a scenario where you're 3/4 of the way in before you ever get to a menu board. And then you say, oh my God, this is ridiculous. You're going to be able to make that decision right then and there as you enter, because it's, comes at you pretty quick.
So the one thing that when I was looking at the stacking lanes in the front yard, and I appreciate the additional diagrams that you provided us, is that we see the back of the building from 36. And I know that'll be addressed by the Plan Commission on having some unique articulation.
We
that
will
would front 36.
definitely make sure it looks like a front
Yeah.
operation.
But-
We understand that. We've talked to Chick-fil-A corporate about that.
But not that we're addressing that here. Again, I like the design from addressing the safety. I think Chick-fil-A is doing a good job on that.
Thank you.
So I've got, man, I can be talking for a few minutes here.
Okay.
First of all, I love Chick-fil-A. I'm a super fan, and I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse that you're putting one within walking distance of my home.
Do you need to recuse yourself? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
no. But it also pains me because I have difficult questions to ask. First of all, I did have concerns with the elimination of the bypass lane, and I think I made some of those apparent when I was talking to staff. I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of that lane is, and usually on the site stuff, because I've worked in the business, I know what that is, and I don't know it here. We typically don't dive in that deep at the BZA level. That's usually vetted out in Plan Commission. But because this is such a Chick-fil-A is a different animal, so I think we're forced to dive into a little bit deeper here. The only other outfit that I've seen that has, number one, the traffic volume you guys do and uses a similar layout would be something like the new In-N-Outs that they're building out west. So again, if it's just a matter of convenience, it's probably not that big a deal, although we require every single business in Avon to have one. So if we're going to hang our hat on that, we need to have a really, really solid practical difficulty for granting this. If there are safety concerns, I hope that comes out in TAC. And I really hope you guys tackle that one hard. That's going to be a tough one on this. And the issue is I just don't know. So that's the bypass lane. I don't know how it works. The piece that I do know that I don't think anybody else knows is why we have this requirement of why you're not supposed to have the stacking in the front of the building. And I was on the original committee that put together, and this is in 2007, the overlay.
Mhm.
And ironically, the two issues that when we were talking about things like that, the two issues that kept coming up were down the street were the Chick-fil-A and the McDonald's. And everybody was upset because there were several businesses in Avon like this, but they weren't oriented to 36, which this corrects. They also don't like to see, this is not specific to those two businesses, but they also didn't want to see the big amounts of parking out front, which you guys have done a great job of moving in back of the building. So those two things are really good in my opinion. The one that's really hard for me to get over is no one wanted that traffic on 36. They didn't want the headlights shining at night through there. They didn't want to see traffic. That one, this kind of falls apart on. So you fixed some things and made some things a little worse. So again, I'm really hoping we need to really have a solid practical difficulty to hang our hats on. But then I go through at least the staff report. We don't have the actual application here. And so I get down to criteria 3, which considers the practical difficulty. And the answer from the petitioner says yes, because the site is previously used outlot that could not reasonably be configured to comply with the requirement. And so you're saying, yes, there's a practical difficulty. and you're saying why you think it's there, but you don't say what the practical difficulty is. And I've noticed that in both parts A and B. We've kind of beat around the bush on it, and I don't have anything to hang my hat on there, and I'm hoping you can give me something.
Well, I think that what I was trying to say is simply that we have a scenario where we've got a site that already has been developed. It is between the frontage road or the rear road, which is a public street, and fronts on 36. So I'm stuck. I have to be in a counterclockwise fashion. Otherwise, you can't do drive-through, period. And that forces, since I'm coming in from the north side, forces it to come around. And some businesses don't need that much stacking, but for the life of me, I can't figure out how you can do your stacking without encroaching into the front yard, given that that type of scenario. So I don't have the luxury of going on my own and finding my own site and doing a greenfield development. We are dealing with site constraints with neighbors and fixed roads and infrastructure that kind of drive that. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay, so let me repeat what I think I heard you say here, and I think you may have tapped on it when you were doing your initial presentation. So for both of these, your practical difficulty would be the constraints of the site versus the requirements of what you're building? Is that?
Well, the constraints of the site kind of drive what you can realistically do and improve the building. So I guess the alternative is to not have drive-through at all, which if the board feels that that's not worth a variance for, I respect that, but that I think is something that's part and parcel to so many of the uses along 36, newer ones and older ones. So I don't know how you get around that requirement. We can mitigate certain things that as a committee member you were concerned about, whether it's lights or headlights or whatever. But keep in mind the headlights would shine on 36 even when you're in the side yard. It's not necessarily a front yard problem. It's just working within the ordinance restrictions, knowing you have to do a counterclockwise motion to have drive-through makes it exceedingly difficult to meet all of the requirements of the UDO. So
I'm not sure there's a way to address, I think it's a practical difficulty because there's not a way to address what you're bringing up without eliminating this design entirely. By definition, and I think Paul was absolutely correct, this is a much safer design in terms of the general public by putting dedicated drive-through lanes that completely avoid interaction with the parking spots and with pedestrians. But by definition, they have to be on the exterior. And because of the design of this specific site, I mean, we could flip it so that, you know, the drive-through lanes are on the north side of the property,
that's a front yard too.
but that's a front yard too. So,
And shame on me for not putting that into my findings. I think I just assumed it was private drive.
so I'm not sure there, other than getting rid of the drive-through, to me, this is, and considering the fact that when taken within the context of where it is located and what the other businesses in the area are doing, I think this is a perfect example of why a variance is appropriate and why we have room for the variances.
And I agree with you 100%. The drive-through design here overall, I think is really good. You know, we've seen some really bad ones come through in the past where they're just, you know, it's just the single lane and they run it right by the front door and it creates safety issues. This one seems to avoid that. But again, Criteria 3 is about practical difficulty. Criteria 1 is about safety. So I want to make sure we got a real practical.
So if you look, Mr. Turner, if you look at think about what your ordinance contemplates, it doesn't contemplate this type of scenario. What it does contemplate is, well, you can use a bypass lane as part of your drive aisle, which introduces the thing that we're trying to avoid, and that is the inherent conflict between those of us that are running in to get something, eating in, coming back out. So some of it is ordinance generated in that respect. And I did put that in the bypass lane finding to say simply that the ordinance just doesn't contemplate this type of thing where you're completely segregating your dine-in traffic from your drive-through traffic.
I think there also needs to be a balance because variance 1 is about safety, or criterion 1 is about safety. I mean, we have, when we're looking at all the criteria, we have to determine what is more, I mean, by definition, we have to say, well, when we're looking at a variance, well, is this criteria more important? I think if we had a site plan that was, I can't imagine what that would be, but that was very, very obviously unsafe, but it met all the criteria, we would have a problem with that. But, well,
I disagree with that statement because these criteria are laid out by Indiana code. We've got
Well,
to check every single box.
I'm sure, I know,
don't check one
but
harder
when
than
we're
another.
talking about a waiver, we do get put into the position of having to balance, because right now we're being asked to waive I mean, you're asking for you say, I don't see a practical difficulty. I absolutely see a practical difficulty. I see it's a practical difficulty because if we require the change of the plan, then it's not as safe. And that is a practical thing. It's a practical difficulty in terms of, as it was pointed out, we have 2 front yards. How do you overcome that? It's a practical difficulty other than not building here.
Well, and I
So-
think I think you just hit the point, and that's what I was trying to get you to
Right.
say. It was,
Yeah.
it's about the constraint of the yards.
Right.
That's probably the only thing we have to hang our hat on.
If I could jump in, if you guys, is it just the way I look at this, because I was thinking about this, what you said, Marcus, and we always struggle with practical difficulty in some of these cases, that we want the entrance to be off Beechwood Drive or the Beechwood Street there and not off 36. And so the entrance and exit are off Beechwood. So the unique design that the more I look at, the more I really like, that has the drive-through around the perimeter, regardless of the size of the property, you'd want it around the perimeter so that you'd have that internal parking and pedestrian traffic and make it more safe. So there's a practical difficulty then because you have that entrance, egress, and the ingress and egress coming off of Beechwood, that you need to have the stacking in the front, which when I first read the case, I'm like, why are we stacking in the front yard of 36 instead of the front yard of Beechwood Drive, which would seem to be a better design and allow the front of the building looking at 36, which is something that I think the petitioner has already indicated that they will address, because again, the articulation of the back of the building doesn't look very pleasant. But when I look at to accommodate the safety, to accommodate the stacking, there is a practical difficulty with moving the drive-through. So not having a committed drive-through without a bypass lane and having stacking in front yard, I do agree there's a practical difficulty of doing it any other way.
Absolutely appropriate to ask me those questions. You're absolutely right. They are statutory criteria. Don't take them lightly, and appreciate the opportunity to talk about them.
Anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns, discussion?
Is there an anticipated day of opening? I know Marcus is going to be putting that on his calendar.
I think I overheard Chris, but I'll let him, if you want to say something on the record, kind of the thinking.
Yeah, so depending on the process and everything, it looks like Chick-fil-A's looking at January 2024, once everything gets approved and moves forward. So, yeah, absolutely.
There's no further discussion. We'll entertain a motion.
I'm glad to make a
And I-
motion.
I would just recommend taking the variances separately if you don't mind. Thanks.
I'm just going to do that. I move that we approve variance 22-04A, Chick-fil-A Beechwood Center, a variance of development standards to allow drive-through stacking within a front yard facing US 36, subject to the following conditions. Menu boards and pickup windows shall not be located in the yard that faces US 36. Any subsequent development plan review petition for the subject site shall be reasonably consistent with the provided concept plan on file, since it has satisfied all the requirements for the variances of development standards under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
A motion by Mr. Guckenberger. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Rainsberg. Is there any discussion? If not, we will take a roll call vote.
Bob Mugenberger,
Four.
Marcy Tashler,
4.
Marcus Turner,
4.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
and Inman.
4.
Thank you.
And then I move that we approve variance 2204B, Chick-fil-A Beechwood Center, a variance of development standards to allow for the removal of the required drive-through bypass lane, subject to the following conditions. 1, clear and conspicuous private directional signage and/or pavement markings shall be installed to navigate automobile operators to their desired locations, since it has satisfied all the requirements for variances of development standards under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
We have a motion by Mr. Guckenberger. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Discussion. I did have one question for you, Mitchell. This will have to go through TAC before they hear the DPR.
Correct.
And my concern is what if issues come up during TAC? Let's say the fire department comes in and says, no way. We bound the town's hands here, or does the plan commission have sufficient discretion in a DPR to deal with a situation like that?
You're correct. What you've done is just authorize how they can use the land. They're still going to have to go through that DPR process and get all of that straightened out. And then the plan commission, although it's ministerial, will have to make sure that those concept plans and layouts meet all of the zoning ordinance and, well, not subdivision control ordinance anyway, because it's a UDO now. So all the elements of the UDO.
So if there are issues, they can be adequately addressed by plan commission.
Correct.
And we haven't screwed them up by approving this.
You're
Okay.
absolutely correct. Yep.
Thank you. Any other discussion before we vote? Roll call, please.
Bob Guckenberger,
4.
Marcy Tashler,
4.
Marcus Turner,
4.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
and Inman.
4.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other business? Okay.
Actually, I do have something. Just a discussion topic. I've had conversations with Mitchell over here, and we're curious about your availability and what you think about moving the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting up to 6:30. Plan Commission meetings are currently held at 6:30. And we're just curious to get your thoughts. You don't make any decisions right now. We can just a discussion on it. So we were curious.
I'll add, so there could be times I won't make it on time because
Okay.
I come from Carmel.
Okay.
And I do find myself stretched a little bit for plan commission. I'm okay with doing it. I would just make the board aware that I may walk in after the meeting started.
I don't have any problem with it.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. We'll discuss it further at the next meeting. So,
Very good.
What do you want? Why do we need to wait if it's four to
you
abstain?
have to waive the rules of procedure to amend it.
We've done that
I want
before.
to make a motion?
I move we wait. Do we need to make a motion to waive the rules of procedure? I move that
And add it to the agenda.
I move that. Is there any instructions, Ian, that you were going to add?
I'm trying to think if there are any conflicts with any members who aren't present here, say my planning director, Jared here.
You're in charge.
Are you?
So I just want to go a second and think about it. And quite frankly, I don't think.
Well, we appreciate you bringing it up, but now you threw it over to us. So
You just opened a Pandora's box, Ian.
I move that we waive the rules of procedures so we can take a vote on the starting time of the Board of Zoning Appeals meetings, and that we add this item to our agenda.
I second.
We have a motion by Mr. Guckenberger and a second by Mrs. Ransberg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Next item on the agenda is discussion of the meeting time. Ian, I appreciate the fact that you want to check with everybody, but you're staying, if you're staying here until 7, doesn't 6:30 get everyone out the door sooner? So who would object to
And that's
that?
the thing, I live 30 minutes away, so I can't really, it's not feasible for me to go home after work and then come back here. So I kind of just sit in the office here for, a couple hours, so it definitely works for me.
Let's just get you all out of here a little bit earlier.
Well, and I like it that with the Plan Commission, when we start early, we end earlier. And it's nice, especially like tonight, that it gives us more of the evening back.
Any other discussion? Anybody want to make a motion?
This is a board that gets stuff done, Ian.
I move that we change the starting time of the Board of Zoning Appeal meetings to 6:30 PM.
Motion by Mr. Guckenberger. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Inman. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Very good.
And we'll make that note in the minutes of your next meeting, and then we can administratively amend your rules and procedures to reflect that change.
So the next meeting, we should be here at 6:30?
Yep.
6:29.
Okay. Anything else?
Jared, did you hear that?
What, I'm sorry?
6:29.
Mark, did you get those to sign or?
Yeah, they'll have stuff for us to sign. We're adjourned. Thank you.